December Tynwald in brief. Well, there's a challenge. There seemed to be an awful lot of very interesting debates and discussions, questions, answers. So let's crack on. We'll get straight into the question paper. I won't cover all the questions, but some of the ones that seemed to elicit some significant discussion included the insights that government has acquired into the light of in light of the takeover of ShopRite and subsequent changes, and what government's opinion is on the taking over of key companies. So that was the question. It quickly, though, developed into Tesco's takeover of ShopRite and particularly food security, with the questioner, Mr Moorhouse, far from satisfied with the answers he was given by the Chief Minister. We then had several other questions, including a question from Mr Hooper to the Chief Minister, wanting to know about the role and remit of the Minister without portfolio. The Chief Minister explained that this was all about developing efficiencies. There's £10 million worth of efficiencies to be found across government. The role would also cover some external relations work, as well as helping with the delivery of the island plan, as well as other policy matters. There was a very significant discussion in the keys, or series of questions and answers, with the Chief Minister getting a little, irritated perhaps by some of the questioning. But the questioners, far from satisfied with all the answers they were given. A range of other questions. I won't go into them all. How many were there? 23 questions in all, including another question by Mr Moorhouse in relation to the waste gate fees. That's the money that we all pay through our rates for the disposal of waste at the incinerator at the bottom of Richmond Hill there. But yes, lots and lots of questions. The new ministers, the new DEFA minister and new DHSC minister had questions to answer. Sorry, I said new DEFA minister. The stand-in DEFA minister, of course, was Laurie Hooper, the new member of DEFA, because the Minister for Environment, Food and Agriculture was unwell on the first day. But Mrs Christian was ably answering her questions for DHSC, and indeed David Ashford was doing a pretty good job at answering his questions at the Cabinet Office. So that was questions. As I say, there were so many there. There was lots of very interesting questions asked, but we haven't got time to go through them all. So that then moved us on to the order paper, and the first item was a statement by the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, and that, of course, is Mr Speaker. And Mr Speaker basically said that because of the changes in health, the investigation by the Public Accounts Committee into the way in which DHSC manages the interface with Manx Care, that investigation was suspended. There were several questions asked of the Speaker, but the Speaker chose, well, I don't know whether he chose, but the President certainly enforced a standing order which basically says that the only thing that can be asked of a chair of a committee is when they will report. And as the chair had already answered that question, several attempts by Mr Hooper and indeed Mr Thomas were questioning some of the presumptions in the statement made by the Speaker. None of those were answered. We then moved to the Manx Utilities Authority pricing review, or rather we don't, because there was a supplementary order paper because apparently there were some errors in the drafting of the pricing review. So we got that was effectively then bumped off to the back of the Tynwald sitting. So we'll come back to that. Department of Infrastructure plan, the Minister and indeed many members acknowledged that this was a really good plan which demonstrated what the work that the Department of Infrastructure is doing. However, it seemed to lack targets, action plans, the sorts of things that many members certainly felt that the whole point of the department plans was to be able to hold departments to account rather than just read about what the departments had done over the course of the last 12 months. So that was the Department of Infrastructure plan. That received support from Tynwald. The Housing and Communities Board policy response to the objective housing assessment of housing need, that was moved by the new Minister Ashford, who is also retaining his position as chair of the Housing and Communities Board. And effectively, the highlight is that there will be 1,000 affordable homes built over the 10 years commencing April 2025. A number of members were concerned that this target allowed for nothing really to happen for the next 5 or so years, and then a big splutter of house development at the very last minute as we approach 2035. The chair of the board disputed that and basically said no, that once April 2025 came along, then the houses would start being built. He did acknowledge, David Ashford, that bearing in mind that we had a housing crisis in 2021, the pace of change has been rather too slow. Mr Moorhouse and Ms Edge voted against the response. Mr Moorhouse particularly being concerned that housing associations were mentioned in the report. There were lots of positives mentioned, but there were none of the potential negatives or drawbacks associated with the housing authority. Then there were various appointments because of the ministerial reshuffle. A number of roles had to be filled, and the highlights there are Mr Moorhouse became the chair of the Economic Policy Review Committee, and Ms Lord Brennan became the new member of the Economic Policy Review Committee. Mr Hooper was elected onto the Constitutional and Legal Affairs and Justice Committee, and Mr Thomas onto the Environment and Infrastructure Policy Review Committee, and Mr Hooper was elected Vice Chair of the Public Accounts Committee. Net zero targets and budgets. If you thought that was just going to be Stu Peters spouting off and very little by way of response, you were mistaken. A lengthy debate ensued. I think it was 2, maybe 3 hours of discussion. And there was a range of views expressed. Certainly not just Stu Peters standing alone on this. Several members offered varying degrees of support. And ultimately, the item received 16 votes in the Keys, 16 for, 5 against, 8 for, none against in Ledgeco. This was the amended motion because, of course, Mr Hooper amended the motion to say, rather than say Tynwald is minded to review the net zero targets and budgets, Mr Hooper amended that to say Tynwald recognises the role net zero targets play in strengthening the Manx economy for the benefit of all island residents, as evidenced within the economic strategy, and notes the continued focus on delivering the island's emission reduction targets. So effectively the motion was turned on its head. Chief Minister made some interesting comments, possibly reflecting a view of some of the members in support of the revised motion, but basically that whilst Tynwald members certainly are very much on board with this, the public opinion is possibly some distance away from the 16-5 in Keys and 8-0 in Ledgeco. and perhaps more needs to be done to convince the public that this is the right thing, I think seems to be the general approach the Chief Minister was suggesting. So then we moved on to the laying of Public Service Commission reports. The new chair, Rob Collister, put forward an amendment which was supported, which basically allowed for these reports to be published. And it all seemed to be going fairly straightforwardly until the previous chair, Kate Lord-Brennan, got up to speak and was quite forceful in her comments, basically that she felt the mover, Mr Hooper, had not paid much attention to this when he was in Council of Ministers, and that this was just a bit of mischief making on his part. Mr Hooper responded in kind. He didn't take at all kindly to some of the accusations being thrown out by Ms Lord-Brennan, and there was a little bit of a spat. The President had to step in. But ultimately, it was agreed that Mr Collister's amendment should be supported, and that was agreed 19 votes for in Keys, none against, 8 votes for in Ledgeco, none against. So then 3 items from Mr Hooper. One, in terms of the higher rate of personal income tax, which is basically putting it back from 22% back down to 20%, removing the tax cap for new applicants, and also removing the age cap on national insurance. And Mr Hooper came pretty close to winning the argument in relation to the higher rate of personal income tax. That was one, or his motion was amended by the Treasury Minister Allinson, 10-9 in Keys and 5-3 in Ledgeco. So it was quite a close vote. Basically, Minister Allinson's view was that nothing to see here, but that they would look into this and perhaps there might be some more mention in the budget. So yes, that was quite a close one, probably one of the closer votes in terms of defeating government that there's been in Tynwald in recent months. The cessation of the tax cap, surprisingly, perhaps, was much less close. Well, can you have much less close? I don't know. But yes, that one Mr Hooper lost. Although there is again to be a review on this. The members voting against on that one were Mr Hooper, Ms Farragher and Ms Maltby in the Keys, and Mrs Kinnish in Legislative Council. And again on the tax cap, the age cap on national insurance, that was an amendment by Mr Allinson, Dr Allinson, basically said that there would be a review of sorts into this, and that amendment was accepted. The vote in Keys ultimately for the amended motion was 19-1 and 8-0 in Ledgeco. And you may, if you're good at maths, have noted that some of the Keys members were missing. Some members had to be absent to attend a funeral, others were unwell, and others had leave of absence. So that was where that came about. Then we had a discussion on budget reform, and again some lively debate there, where again Treasury stepped in to suggest that a select committee of 5 members be established to investigate the role of the legislature in the budget process and to submit a report to Tynwald by the last day of February in 2026. So about 14 months' time, just in time for the 2026 election year, to allow the matter to be tucked into the long grass. Some may rather cynically suggest. However, the members of that committee are to be Dr Allinson, the Treasury Minister, Minister Ashford, Cabinet Office, Mr Thomas, Mr Speaker, and Mrs Kinnish. So it'll be interesting to see what that committee ultimately concludes and whether indeed Tynwald will accept their recommendations. There was a further item on membership of government departments put down by Mr Thomas. Airports and civil aviation, aircraft noise certification order, climate impact assessment amendment regulations, a Tobacco Products Duty Act amendment order, and beneficial ownership obliged entities access order. And that completed the order paper. But, of course, as those sharp-eared listeners will note, we did also have this supplementary order paper, and the supplementary order paper was that the Manx Utilities Authority Pricing Review November 2024 version 2 be received and the following recommendations be approved. That Manx Utilities' proposed pricing strategy for the next 5 years, including the report prepared by ECA to achieve an appropriate balance between the financial sustainability of Manx Utilities and the impact utility charges have on customers, a sewerage rate for the financial year commencing April 25 of 270.7 pence in the pound, and further sewerage rate increases in April 26, 27 and 28 and 29 at the prevailing rate of inflation over the preceding 12 months as measured by the Manx Consumer Price Index. There were some questions on this to the Vice-Chair, because the Chair was absent from the whole Tynwald sitting. I'm not sure the Vice-Chair was able to answer them all, but one of the questions was in relation to that first part of the recommendation, which was that there seemed to be some level of difference between the report prepared by the ECA to achieve an appropriate balance and the Manx Utilities Authority Pricing Review. So, but whether or not that was a significant difference, the Keys voted 16 for, 5 against, and Legco voted 7 for, and 1 against. And yes, gosh, what a busy Tynwald. And for once, we were focused on just the items on the order paper. The excited chatter behind the scenes seems to have died down thanks to the ministerial reshuffle. So, not quite certainly a very large nutshell. That was December Tynwald.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Manx Radio Newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.